Here is the follow-up video from our wellness discussion. We didn't get a chance to talk on Wednesday, so I just want to go through and just emphasize things. So you have the slides to this. Please have those out while you listen, and I'll just point out little things that I want to emphasize and go through. There may be a couple new things here and there, but that's what I want you to do. I am going to go back real quick just to put a period on the Healthy People survey, that survey that is done over the health of the entire nation, kind of the health status of and I want you to make basically the key points. I want you to know the purpose of doing that every 10 years and taking that assessment, and then what it's used for. So that report then is used to make action items, as a rationale to do things and make some of these kind of things and spend money and that kind of stuff. So this is the slide that I really want you to focus on with the healthy people kind of aspect. All right, now we can see SpongeBob Flex. Because we move into muscular fitness, you should have an idea of a lot of this. So I'll go pretty quick. You should know some of these. If you don't, you can look at those. So strength versus endurance, you'll need to know the differences as you hear questions about that kind of stuff. Atrophy and hypertrophy, obviously you need to know what that is and the kind of the concepts behind that. This one right here, this resting metabolic rate and basal metabolic rate, is just that baseline energy need. Like what do we need energy wise, and what is your body going to burn just to keep you alive? Think of basal metabolic rate as like the minimum just to stay alive, kind of like when you're asleep, right? So when you're asleep and you're doing nothing, what does it need? What does your body need to, what kind of energy does it burn to keep you going? And it burns some calories. The resting metabolic rate is more like when you're resting, when you're just sitting down. You may be watching TV or doing, you're doing some stuff. You may be even just kind of snacking on stuff. That's still kind of a resting metabolic rate. Sometimes those are used, I don't say interchangeably, but they'll go back and forth with what the calculation is. But ultimately, the big thing is number one, knowing what it is, right? And then number two, muscular strength is a way to increase resting metabolic rate, which is good, especially if you want to become lean and become, you'll burn more in that, that metabolizing calorie type stuff, which is if you're trying to lose weight and become fit, that's helpful as we go through there. There's still an overwhelming consensus about gender differences, that male versus female. Males typically have a much more likelihood of hypertrophy, and they have the male hormones are much more dominant. Not in everybody, right? There's some, hormonal levels are different in all kinds of people, and especially if people start doing artificial, additions with that. But for the most part, recognize that there is a gender difference as we go through there. These principles are things that you should know, so I'm not going to really talk about those. You should have a good handle on what this is, and so you may be asked about the said principle, or even reversibility, or progressive overload, that kind of stuff. You definitely need to know the different modes of training. I know Monica's been talking about that in her class. And then, especially as we start to, now we don't do a lot of exercise prescription, but we need to know about it from a what's a healthy way and a common way, so that when we do try to intervene and prevent, or either prevent injury during the actual strength training itself, or prevention through strength training, right? We're going to look at our classic, you should have kind of a classic or an understanding of this classic periodization, where we start low resistance, high volume, and then kind of move toward as we acclimatize basically to the exercise. There's a reverse periodization that might be used as well. Again, this is a lot more for that endurance development if we're doing stuff. And then there's this up and down concept as well. So we can do that as well. When we get through the mode of training, you should have an idea of the different types of contractions, what they are, not only what they are, but then what they're, what kind of components come with them. So I've gone over that. I know Monica's going over that. You need to know this. So if you still have questions, please let me know, and I'll deal with it. There are a number of different strength, kind of programs. Here's your general window, right? Around this 80% of a 1 rep max, somewhere between, if we're doing this for strength, I'm trying to get stronger now. I'm going to do somewhere in a lower repetition progressively increasing my resistance, and then on a anywhere between 2 to 4 sets, right? And so there's a number of different specific programs, but that's what we do. The frequency per week, you can see that there needs to be at least 1 day off in between. If today's leg day, I shouldn't do a whole bunch of legs tomorrow. So I need to have some kind of thing. And then definitely recognize that adolescents, the wide variability in the adolescent population. Some adolescent athletes will be able to handle weight training and muscular exercise very well. Others will not be able to. And so the differences in how boys versus girls mature, or even just individuals maturing at different points in there. You can see that it's typically advised is a safer kind of approach. Start with just some basic body weight exercises. Then we're going to more form exercises right here with very light weight. Then we can start looking at, all right, now once the person has acclimatized and can handle that, then yes, we're going to allow them to do more weight. Fun picture here, squirrels with the force. You guys, again, should know some of this concept here about this flexibility. I'm not going to talk too much about it. If you are questioning, or you have questions, please let me know specifically. I'll get some my super flexibility. We've talked about length tension relationship and this should be a reminder to you. I like this slide or this picture the best. Let me know if you don't have this, because I really think this kind of describes the length tension relationship really good. All right, we've talked about muscular flexibility and the different types of stretching, and so you should be able to figure that out. It does, flexibility is always a common risk factor or thing that is used as a, hey, we need to decrease injuries, we need to get more flexible. Well, what does that mean, right? We can just stretch, but where's our measurement? How do we know what is, if we're talking about low back injuries and the hamstring flexibility? Well, what's a good flexibility? What's a good sit and reach value? What's a good motion? There's specific motions that we talk about. If we're going to talk about shoulder injuries, let's do a ratio of internal versus external rotation, right? So what's that look like as we start to measure stuff? And this is our FMS, functional movement screening, as another way of flexibility. Do we have the ability to get into these positions and function? And then based on the scoring, what does that mean for our injury risk kind of stuff? All right, so then we get into this concept of, is somebody ready to exercise? This is usually for the untrained or general population group that you might, especially if you work at like Frito-Lay or these other, you might want to go, okay, are you ready to exercise? I'm going to start you on a preventative exercise program, but let's make sure that you're not at risk for something. Most of the time in our athletic populations, especially at college, they've exercised, so they're ready. They may be out of shape, but they're ready, and they've been screened and along those lines. So there's a number of different questionnaires. I'm going to refer you to this PAR-Q questionnaire, which is what you see here. And so ultimately it's just a general, and I'll scroll down. You can look this up on your own, but I'll scroll down relatively quickly. But it's just basically a kind of a brief questionnaire on some basic, red flags to exercise. If you have some, and it says if you have some yeses, then you gotta, let's do a health histories thing. And so this is much more health history-ish on page 2 and 3. As I scroll down, respiratory disease, spinal cord injuries, is there any stroke? Is there anything that is, that you need to be, that we need to be aware of, you're in danger of doing? And then finally, you're saying I've done this. I've declared that I've been honest, and I'm taking the liability basically. So that's just a way of, assessing if somebody's at risk for any kind of injuries, and we want to prevent those and identifying them. And it's also a way to protect you and anybody else related to what's going on with that kind of stuff. All right, the final part of this, I'll go again. I'm trying to go pretty quickly, so because a lot of this should be self-explanatory or stuff that you can kind of follow up on as well. obviously we know about stress. I think what I want you to know, what stress is and what can stress, and the body works to be in this balance system. You should know the terms eustress, eustress and distress kind of thing. Some stresses are good. Even the stress of going to class and having a bunch of homework, that's a motivating stress. It's not fun, but it's a stress that is essential, that pushes the organism forward and gets you to be a better person, to be able to handle more things, especially if we do it on a gradual basis kind of stuff. Lots of things, if we get to the amount of stress, and everybody handles stress differently, but if we get too much stress, there's a number of disease states that come from not only too much stress, but consistently high, prolonged stress. So most of this stuff I'm going to go through, you have this information on your, and I don't think there's much you just need to have an idea of what kinds of things in each of these body systems stress can cause. A couple of you talked about the skin conditions that are related to stress. Those were in there. And so definitely immune system, definitely some other stuff. I do want you to have an idea in that, like, that immediate stressful situation. All right, we have this fight or flight kind of concept where even though we're not being chased by a tiger, right, and but the stress still gets us in that same reaction when you're public speaking and you're super nervous, or somebody is attacking you, like verbally attacking you in front of other people, or you're put in a stressful situation. You still get those same kind of reaction. This general adaptation syndrome, you should know that. I mean, that's just have a general idea of this concept of how we react to stress. So there's these three phases. Alarm, this is what happens in that initial reaction to whatever the stressor is. Then at some point we go into this resistance, where now we're going on a maintenance. We're going to keep this high level of functioning and stressfulness. Hopefully you get to a recovery point and you can get to, the end of the semester. Now I have a nice Christmas break to recover and go through and recuperate. If that never happens, right, if you're always stressed by something, and it may be home life or whatever it is, then that's the problem, is that if you remain in that state of arousal and resistance to that stress, that's the bad thing. On the anxiety side, anxiety is a little bit more of a, you can have anxiety without stress. Some people just get anxiety and they have this intense, persistent worry. A lot of times stress causes anxiety, right? So they can be linked, but there's a number of stuff. I want you to know just some general ideas of the types of anxiety, right? So if you're dealing with general kind of life effects of general anxiety toward everything, right, then for a long period of time, then you might be diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder. Just so that's exactly what it means, general. And then there's a number of other different specific types of anxieties that you can have. As far as dealing with anxiety, I probably could have asked you this in class, and you would have come up with a lot of these, right? So you probably know what to do to deal with, and know some strategies to deal with anxiety and stress. But here's the specific list and things that, So if we're doing a prevention, right? If we want to do a prevention program to reduce anxiety, reduce stress, how do we get programs that are going to generate more physical activity? Are we going to create time and scheduling, and what resources do we need to create this prevention program? All right, so I've reached the amount of time that I wanted to, so I'm going to show you some pictures that, as long as at least you're not in this situation, at least on the plane. You could be on the beach. That'd be kind of a fun picture to do, and then there's that. Okay.